Hey everyone, hope you're well. Now then, let's do this again, shall we? Despite the fact that nobody watches these videos. Relatively speaking, of course. Frankly, I don't care that they don't get any love from the YouTube algorithm. Some of you out there enjoy them, and I sure do love making them, so we're keeping this train going through the 80s. In this episode, we're going to have a look at the year 1983, and what I consider to be the top 10 best rock guitar riffs from that year. Gonna play them through in no particular order, and when all is said and done, you guys can drop a vote for your favorite down below in the comment section. Easy as pie plumbing. I have no fucking idea what that means. I went to Google and I put in easy as, and it's the very first thing that shows up in search, in Google search. So I'm guessing that pie plumbing is pretty damned easy to do, whatever it is. Regardless, and before we get started, we need to go back to my previous video in this series from 1982 and choose a winner. So let's get on that right now. Good then, the winner of Riff Battle 1982 is... Great damned riff, that. Good choice, people. Nipping at its heels in second place was the riff to Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden, and the classic riff to Bad to the Bone by George Thorogood took a surprising third place. Way to go, George, hanging in there with the metalheads. All right then, Riff Battle 1983, and our first contender in that hard rock metal-filled year. From the very first moment I heard this riff back in 1983, my very first thought was, that is a great goddamn guitar riff. And it's a riff from Fast Eddie Clarke and his post-Motorhead project, Fastway. A year after his less than harmonious ouster from Motorhead, Fast Eddie Clarke hooked up with bassist Pete Way of UFO and some fresh-faced kid from Ireland by the name of Dave King, who had a set of vocal pipes on him as good as pretty much anyone else in the business, and Fastway was born. This track, generally considered the highlight of the band's debut album, is as infectious a hard rock track as they come, with, like I said, just a killer opening guitar riff. It's easily one of my favorite overall tracks of the 80s. This is Fast Eddie Clarke, Fastway, and say what you will. Good then, contender number two. For contender number two, we have an opening riff that many people don't even know was played on a guitar. At least the opening lead-in section before the main riff proper. I think a lot of people out there indeed think that it's a synthesizer, but believe me, and Steve Stevens, guitarist of Billy Idol, it is indeed played on a guitar. It's a damn clever little refrain that Steve says he pulled from an old blues guitar track from back in the 30s or some such thing. It's a blues finger-picking technique whereas you keep the rhythm flowing with one or two right-hand fingers while doing a walking bass line with your thumb. And it's actually quite tricky to do and, you know, to get it all timed correctly, and it's very cool. Regardless, this opening little refrain only lasts for just a few short seconds before the main riff proper takes it over. And that is a riff which also kicks ass in its own right. Let's check it out. This is Steve Stevens and Billy Idol with Rebel Yell.
Came dancing to my door. Last night the little angel came pumping on my floor. She said, "Come, baby, you got a license for love."
Right then, contender number 3. For contender number 3, we have something a bit more on the metal side of things. And to tell the truth, there's going to be a lot of metal on this list, as it was absolutely booming in the mid-80s, and great metal riffs and hard rock riffs were certainly in no short supply. It's from the fantastic Jake E. Lee and Ozzy Osbourne, and it's simply one of the greatest hard rock metal guitar riffs of all time. Now, Jake, at the time, had some rather large shoes to fill in replacing the legendary Randy Rhoads in Ozzy Osbourne's band. And I'd say that he came through with flying colors in pretty much every sense of the term, but especially in the composition of this popular Ozzy track and its mighty and memorable opening guitar riff. This is Bark at the Moon and Jakey Lee. Contender number 4 and more metal. I told you, didn't I? And guess who has finally entered the game? And believe me, they ain't going nowhere for quite a while on these lists. It is Metallica. Now, were I to make 40 more of these lists, they could certainly still be here at the very last, as they're still going strong, releasing new material over 40 years later. 1983, of course, saw the release of Metallica's debut album, Kill 'Em All, and the game had just been upped as far as hard rock and metal guitar riffage went. They had also, of course, become much faster, intricate, and challenging to play, and you can thank one James Hetfield and one Mr. Dave Mustaine for that very fine development. This album, Kill 'Em All, is just one great metal riff after another, but I thought that I would go with arguably the most famous of them all. This is the super fun to play riff to Seek and Destroy and Metallica. Onward to contender number 5 in our Riff Battle 1983. Now, 1983 was sadly the very last that we would hear from the legendary rockers Thin Lizzy of Ireland. As vocalist, bassist, frontman, and all-around cool cat Phil Lynott would die of septicemia a few short years later, before the band could create and release a follow-up to that year's Thunder and Lightning. The perennial 70s rockers Thin Lizzy were poised and more than ready to take on their hard-rocking 80s contemporaries with the release of this album, and it is without doubt the band's heaviest. It is also my very favorite album of theirs. Regardless, Thin Lizzy always had great and notable guitar players, and this album was certainly no exception. On Thunder and Lightning and on the riff that we're highlighting today, we had the very underrated and very formidable guitar talents of one Mr. John Sykes. Let's check out the riff that I speak of from arguably the most well-known track from that album. This is Cold Sweat, John Sykes and Thin Lizzy. Good then, contender number 6. And like Metallica, Ronnie James Dio has now entered the game with the onset of 1983. Solo Ronnie James Dio, to be more precise, because after years of being more or less a hired gun vocalist for the likes of Rainbow and Black Sabbath, it was certainly high time for Dio to have his own name on the marquee, considering his towering stature within the hard rock and heavy metal scene. You know, despite the fact that he was just a little fella. However, considering his absolute massive vocal talents, it was time enough to have all of the attention shine on him and him alone. And in 1983, we got just that with the release of his mega-selling debut solo album, Holy Diver. Loads of cool guitar riffs from guitarist Vivian Campbell on this album, but in the end, I went with my favorite and one of the heaviest. This is contender number 6. This is Vivian Campbell, Dio, and Straight Through the Heart. Contender number 7. All right, then let's break from the metal here for a bit for the next two, shall we? Before closing this out with two final classic metal riffs. For now, at number 7, we have the legendary Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble. Stevie's debut album, Texas Flood, was of course released in 1983 and pretty much took the guitar world and the world in general, I suppose, by storm. The blues was back, baby, and back in a big way. Not since the early 60s had straight-ahead traditional blues music been heard on the radio and the driving force behind massive album sales. For 20-odd years, the blues had pretty much gone underground, kind of like the way hard rock and metal is these days, at least from a standpoint of mainstream success. It took one man and one man alone to bring it back into the mainstream in the mid-'80s, and that man was Stevie Ray Vaughan. And we sing his praises to this very day, not only for his incredible talent on the guitar, but for having the belief and foresight to see that there was still some fight in the old girl yet. That old girl being the blues, of course. This is my contender number 7 in Riff Battle 1983, and it's one of Stevie's original tracks from Texas Flood. This is Pride and Joy. All right, onward and upward to contender number 8. Now, I'm not really calling this a metal riff. However, this band, when they first hit the scene a few years previous, were pretty much by all accounts considered a metal act. A rather big player in the whole new wave of British heavy metal scene, to be quite honest. However, 2 albums and a few years later, it's now 1983, and these guys have settled into a bit more of a polished hard rock sound. That band is Def Leppard, and this polished hard rock sound, honed to perfection by producer Mutt Lange, would pull them from somewhat mainstream obscurity and propel them into becoming one of the biggest bands in the world during the 80s. 1983 saw the release of their first massive selling album, Pyromania, and this track would be the lead-off release and would go on to become a major worldwide hit. This is my contender number 8. This is Photograph by Def Leppard. Alright then, let's finish up here with a couple of classic metal riffs. Like I said, this first one, as my contender number 9, has always been one of my favorites by a band that I was a massive fan of back in the 80s. That band is the German outfit Accept, and 1983 saw the release of what would go on to become the band's biggest selling and far and away most popular album, Balls to the Wall. Accept guitarist Wolf Hoffman, just going to stop here for a second to say how cool a name is Wolf. You know, here I am with a girl's name, and there's guys out there in the world named Wolf. You know, life ain't fair sometimes. Anyway, band founder and guitarist Wolf Hoffman was an absolute monster when it came to creating cool, creative, heavy as hell metal guitar riffs. My choice here at number 9 is certainly one of his heaviest and one of his very best. This is my contender number 9 in Riff Battle 1983. This is the title track to Balls to the Wall. This is Balls to the Wall. All right, then, let's finish up with a famous one of the most famous metal guitar riffs of all time. A riff learned early on by pretty much any hard rock metal guitarist worth their salt. Contender number 10 is from Iron Maiden and a track from the band's 1983 album Peace of Mind. Maiden in the 80s were pretty much unstoppable, releasing 5 or 6 albums in a row that basically redefined metal. And as an aside, why the hell aren't these guys in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame just yet? Seriously? Regardless, pretty damned hard to follow up the incredible Number of the Beast album from 1982. And honestly, Peace of Mind, on the whole, doesn't quite measure up. But it's still a pretty damn good Iron Maiden release, with a number of classic Maiden tracks held within. None more so than this one and its uber famous guitar riff. This is my contender number 10. This is the Trooper. Up the Irons. That's not correct. Up the Irons. That's the shocker, I think. Well, there you go. Riff Battle, 1983. Certainly hope you enjoyed that nearly as much as I did putting the whole thing together. As usual, please drop a vote for your favorite down below in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. Drop me a subscribe if you haven't done that already, as that would be awfully nice. Hit that notification bell somewhere here so you know when I upload something new. And hope you're well out there in your little guitar corner of the world, wherever that may find you. And we'll see you next time. Cheers.